There's a man behind you. Don't yell, Mommy. The woman in the closet will be angry. What's the scariest, most disturbing thing a kid has ever said to you? Grab a blanket, turn off your lights, and get ready for 5 true scary things kids have said. Snake Man. While changing my daughter in front of the open closet door, she kept looking around me and laughing. I asked her what was so funny. She said, "The man." To which I replied, "What man?" She then pointed at the closet and said, "The man with the snake neck." I turned around and nothing was there. I'm afraid to look into the history of my house to see if anyone hung themselves in the closet. At least she wasn't scared. I couldn't sleep. Right out of college, I got a job as a nanny for 2 elementary-age girls. For their anniversary, the parents went on a week-long cruise, and I stayed home with the kids. The first few nights, the 8-year-old would come into my room multiple times a night and wake me up. It was obvious she hadn't pre-planned what she was going to say, or any reason for waking me up, so she would stumble through an excuse on the spot, like, "I just wanted to make sure we are still going to the park tomorrow," or "I think I forgot to brush my teeth and wondered if I should go do it now or wait till the morning." I figured she was just missing her parents and feeling out of sorts, so I let it slide at first. But by the 4th or 5th time, knowing I needed to sleep to keep up with 2 active kids, I told her that she wasn't going to wake me up unless there was an emergency. I got a couple more hours of undisturbed sleep, but woke up with a weird feeling around 5 a.m. I turned over and nearly pissed myself. The girl had brought over a chair right next to the bed and is staring down at me. It didn't help that she had long dark hair, and this happened a few months after The Ring came out. Her explanation? "I just thought it would be fun to watch you sleep. I didn't wake you." Touché, kiddo. The Dead Child's Toys. I don't know if this is relevant, but here's something I had said when I was a youngster. When I was about 5-ish, my dad's cousin shot his 7-year-old son and then shot himself. The reason being, his wife filed for divorce and wanted custody of their son, and he went crazy. Well, after this happened, my dad and his brothers had to clean out their cousin's house. Since I was the youngest one at the time, they all decided, "Oh, let's get the dead child's toys. That's great." So I ended up with one of those little Tykes outdoor play castles. You know, the one where there was a little plastic castle tower and you could just sit inside? Such a cool fort. Anyways, the one day I was sitting inside the tower and my mom was on the deck and she heard me talking to myself. So she comes over and asks who I'm talking to this time. I had a lot of imaginary friends. I told her I was talking to the little boy whose castle it was, and told him not to cry because my mommy could be his mommy. My mom promptly had my dad throw out the castle. Edit. Here's another fun part of the story. When my dad was packing the boy's stuffed animals and stuffed into his truck to bring them for a donation, he heard a little boy's voice say, "What are you doing with my toys?" Now my dad was the manliest man I'd ever met, and he said he got freaked out by the voice because it was so clear. You think this would be a good sign to not give me any of his toys? I was crying. Every once in a while, my father tells me the story of my childhood. When I was around 6 years old, my dad's best friend committed suicide. We'll call him Joe for the sake of the story. Anyways, it was a very rough and emotional time for my dad. Joe was my dad's best man at his wedding, the one guy who was always there for him. After my dad got married, he and my mother left Joe and the town they were in to start a life outside of the town they grew up. After years of moving around California, my family eventually moved to Utah, where my father worked for a successful internet business. Joe stayed behind in Washington. Because my family was so far away from their old life with Joe, there wasn't a lot of foresight or warning that Joe intended to end his own life. Joe's sister apparently had been blaming Joe's wife for her brother's suicide. Joe and his wife drank a lot of booze, and probably as a result, fought a lot. My father always said that they were a very passionate couple. Yes, they would often fight, but he hardly knew two other individuals who were so completely in love. For this reason, he didn't believe it. A few days after Joe committed suicide, his widow called out my father sobbing about how she thought it was her fault. About after an hour of trying to console her, he told her, "If there was a way for me to talk to Joe now, I guarantee you that he would tell you that he loved you and that it wasn't your fault that he ended his life." Crying, she still didn't believe him, but she thanked him for the kind words and let my father go. My dad was obviously very distraught after that long hysteric conversation. He had been down in his office for a while, and he decided to come up and check on his kids while making a pot of coffee to take his mind off of things. We were all supposed to be napping, and he thought he peeked his head into our rooms to make sure we were safe, or maybe try to have a little smile or brightness added to his day. Sure enough, when he got to my room, I was fast asleep on my bed. He went to my brother's room, and he was also sleeping. Finally, he checks on my sister, who is sleeping as smugly as an angel. He decides to go back towards my room and into the kitchen to make some coffee. As he walks by into my room, he notices a whimper. He turns around and enters my room, where he finds me weeping. I was 5 years old, so the way I was crying seemed odd to him. Normally, a 5-year-old boy would cry drastically over dramatically. I wasn't. I was just sitting on the side of my bed, weeping. My dad enters my room and says, "Maddie, what's up? Why are you crying?" It's then that I stopped crying for a moment, looked up at him with teary eyes and said, "Rick, it's not her fault. I love her. It's not her fault." With that, I stopped crying, rolled back over onto my bed, and fell swiftly back to sleep. Needless to say, my dad shat his pants. He knew my dad's name. Adding to the creepy, my dad grew up spending most weekends and afternoons after school with his grandmother, my great-grandmother, in a big old house in Southern California. She died only a few weeks after the house was sold in the early 60s, before she'd gone settled anywhere else. When I was about 12, more than 30 years later, we happened to be visiting friends in the area, and my dad looked up the current owners to see if they'd mind us stopping by. Turned out, their parents had bought the house from my great-grandmother, and they were very happy to have us stop by. As we wandered around, my dad commented on the things that were the same and the things that were different. The woman, who was very friendly and warm, started looking at us very oddly. Finally, she couldn't help herself, and she said, "Look, I know this is strange, but..." And she began telling us all of these things. Every radio in the house, no matter what, will only play my great-grandmother's favorite classical music station, ever. Nearly every time they left the house, they'd come home to find it on. Everything they planted in the flower box next to the kitchen window will die, and though they replaced the soil several times, poppies grew there every time without fail, and flower all year round. Guess what my great-grandmother's favorite flowers were? She always had poppies in that box. Frequently, their kids would talk about the nice old lady in the sunroom, my great-grandmother's favorite room. Several times the woman talking to us was positive she had heard an old woman singing in that room, something she used to do in the late afternoon as my dad played and she sewed. Just then, their 6-year-old son came home from school, saw me, and ran up to me beaming. "Have you come to visit the old lady? She'll be so happy. She talks about you all the time." Then turned to my dad. And here's the kicker. He knew my dad's name.